Well, it's all the weather's not, the light's not that great, so you probably would rather look at a fire than my face anyway. Um, so I've just been having a look, sort of covering the whole sort of the solar eclipse and the comet issue, and I'll just start off by going to look. I'm reading this article basically, and it's shooting down this idea that the extremely unusual lightning storms that have been taking place in the last couple of weeks along the elliptic line are likely to be sort of part of a phenomena that could actually trigger off an earthquake along the new Madrid fault line, and that affects the ionosphere. Now, the gist of the article, and I'm just summarizing that up, but the gist of the article and the fact check on that article by Newsweek was that, oh, no, well, yes, the atmosphere is affected a little bit, but it's not enough to do this, blah, blah, blah. And they're talking about in relation to the eclipse. But the thing is, what's really interesting is that, it's a case of that article is a classic example of knowing enough damage, or knowing a little bit of something, it's enough to turn around and do damage because you don't actually know what you're talking about. Because, for example, in that particular entitled article, it didn't mention the fact that it's not just that there is an eclipse taking place, but there is also currently a solar storm taking place, which will in turn feed the existing, not just feed it, like increase it, but will increase it exponentially. So instead of going boom, creates another boom, it goes boom, boom. And then the other fact that we've also got in play is that we've got a comet at the moment. Now, the comet, just as a mass as a meteorite or an asteroid alone, itself also creates a bow shock that's going at incredibly fast speeds, and that also affects the atmosphere, which again feeds into the initial inertial energy that's happening to the ionosphere and does it cumulatively. So it feeds, you've not got just that the lightning, the ionosphere is ionized, but it's also now been ionized by a solar storm, which has in turn been ionized by foreign bodies traveling in very large. I mean, these things actually travel with literally their own volcano. Which then brings us to the other aspect of it, is that when you turn around and you look at the story, basically, of what's happened with comets in the past, is they suggest that comets might actually particularly contain material from dark galaxies, and that material in turn has a sort of an impact upon basically the ionosphere, and in fact a whole lot of other factors, but basically it does actually affect the Earth. And there is a suggestion that past mass extinction events, areas have actually been caused by this dark matter coming within contact within our own electromagnetic field. And that it's caused floods, it's caused earthquakes. So in that terms, yes, actually that's the other thing. So that it said, this is when you report about the eclipse, they need to report it in conjunction with what other activities are also taking place and how they interrelate into each other. So it's then, of course, there's the fact that when you travel a look at where the eclipse has travelled, the total eclipse path, which has, other eclipses have travelled across there beforehand, and there's one little place there called Egypt, which is actually going to experience two solar eclipses within basically a 200-year period, which is, phenomenally staggering odds. Now, the little Egypt meets up in an area on the map which basically called the new Madrid fault line, which has been the subject of a lot of very large-scale FEMA Emergency Management Agency exercises, because of the fear that trigger line, if it tripped, would cause massive staggering casualties. In Arkansas alone, they would estimate a casualty rating of 15,000 people alone. And of course, this is along the ecliptic line, which again is what the original story said, which is it travels. And the original story says, while it's true it travels along partly, it doesn't travel along all of it. Well, I sort of think that's a splitting hairs. It's still travelling along that particular area, and that's an area where a lot of people are going to be, moving to and converging on that particular time frame, which is going to cause an additional strength to the emergency resources if anything does actually take place, which has actually taken place in the 1811s. The last time they actually had an event which occurred with the Eclipse, which also occurred with the Comet. Basically, those two particular events, as I said, looked like they fed into each other. It was like, well, not just one event, but that both these events had a cumulative impact upon them, and it actually did cause some of the biggest earthquake damages that North America's ever known along that Madrid fault line. Lastly, but not leastly, is the fact that if you actually look today, as of today, we've had two earthquakes occur, 7.7 and a 7.5, and 7.7 in Japan, 7.5 in Taiwan. And those two particular events, basically you normally get 8, 7+ earthquakes a year. Well, we've had 2 in one day. So you normally get 50,000 earthquakes, I think greater than 3 plus or something like that. So even when we also look back at the whole area of Madrid fault line, what we also notice is that it's actually been noticing a surge in earthquake activity along that Madrid fault line, and that's been the subject of numerous articles in different state and county and national newspapers that have all pointed out that these earthquakes that have been occurring and how they're quite being, sort of more frequent than the actual usual, and occurring also in lots of places where they don't expect them to occur, but which is actually again on the ecliptic line. So at this point, I'm not saying run to the hills and panic, but what I am saying is that there is this connection to comets and dark matter which has this known risk. I don't think it's a conspiracy to say, well, this is something that we've been maybe you shouldn't go out and travel down there and be part, block up the problems and cause more issues. Maybe it's just to be on the cautious side. Everyone stays at home, and that's probably the wiser thing to do. There is, of course, the second thing of saying, well, it's not just saying, yes, what might cause earthquakes. Well, what we're seeing is we are starting to see a very strange pattern of earthquakes, and a lot of them occurring in the areas which we have past previous events have shown had this particular comet ecliptic relationship. In fact, a lot of these places that we've been to, some of them actually have Moon Beach is one other one. They actually have a named after because of the fact that they have experienced this. So anyway, that's my little sort of update on this whole situation. Which, as I said, we know that also it's quite interesting because the Wallop Islands, Virginia, is launching up on that. Is also launching from the ecliptic line, which is the one, the original one I was looking about, the National Reconnaissance one they launched about 2-3 weeks ago, involving Rocklab, the New Zealand company, and it turned out that yes, I was correct. It does actually have a military electronic warfare capability. We now know the New Zealand Defence Force actually do have a satellite link to doing propagations experiments on it, so we can tick that off the list as yep, I got that particular right, and it is on the ecliptic line. And what we are finding is that yes, CERN is going to be in Mexico along with NASA, and CERN is carrying out this experiments. And what's more, the ground stations do involve Superdan, and they actually also involve HARP. Where HARP and Superdan, of course, have that relationship between North Pole and South Pole, the two signals. I'm not saying again necessarily that there is any malice or thing sinister about that, but I'm just saying that those hard assets can be linked and involved in this particular experiment, or these experiments, which I think basically are the attempt to basically have a look at what dark matter actually is. Yes, it has military applications, but anything beyond that is that's all speculation and above my pay grade. But I've now reported it. You now know exactly what I know.